We just finished a live session with Scott McWilliams. This guy has had 30 plus properties in his portfolio, is a property manager, and is all about value add. And also, we wanted to break down these new tenancy laws. What the heck are these changes that have come in June? And what are the ones that are coming up in September this year as well? And how is this going to affect property investors? Is it all bad news? There is some good news in there as well, which is awesome. As a property investor, we need to be identifying areas of value, but not just the area itself, the hot spots versus the not spots. So some of the things to identify some of the more hot spots, but then also the properties within those areas. How do we renovate them in a way that doesn't overcapitalize? Hey everyone, my name is Joe Tucker, and together with Jeff Miles, we created Australia's largest property investment community called Oz Property Investors. You can check that out. We've got over 76,000 property investors, and it's a great community for everyone to learn and grow as property investors so that we can all build scalable and sustainable property portfolios. So that's a bloody mouthful. This session is live with Scott McWilliams, so let's jump in. He's from Ideal Property, and we're going to learn some stuff today. Let's do it. What are some other key considerations from an asset type that people should be thinking about?
People always forget about like power lines and things overhead. Like the banks still have issues with those. Look at those first. Don't waste your time on like building and pests and all the rest of it when you know you've got power lines and the bank says no thanks. I've had a lot of properties recently where there's like a junction box like cornered out of part of the property at the front, and there's the Telstra box or something sitting on it. That's not very appealing to an owner occupier in the future, and so you're limiting your pool to sell to later. So I try to stay away from those. And then I look at the neighborhood. Like it's all well and good to buy property. It looks really great online, but if you, I always tell everyone, like if you can't get there, get onto Google, go down to Street View and just walk around like 3 or 4 blocks from the house and have a look at how it presented, and go back to the historical data. You know how you can like select the year that the photos were taken and keep going back. And look at that and see like has it changed, and which way has it changed? Is it better or worse than it was? Because every agent knows how to market a property and make it look good.
Yeah, I
so
see.
Scott, I want to know.
Go on, Jeff. What do you want to know?
I was going to say, what are the? We've talked about sort of some of the. I want to hear sort of the top sort of 3, or what are the key critical mistakes that people are taking in the area? Because we've talked about the Housing Commission with and sort of the issues with sort of crime and that sort of thing. What are the sort of things that you find day in, day out that the newbie investor is making?
Definitely something you guys touched on earlier, which is buying for buying's sake because their budget's low. I get a lot of inquiry from people saying, hey, look at this property. I'm like, what the hell? It's actually like, there's properties that are advertised at the moment that say like sold as is, where is, you can't have an inspection. Like that's a red flag. Why would I buy that? They're like, that's all my budget can afford. I'm like, well, then maybe get out of this location and go to this location, like 600 kilometers away. Because just getting into the market for the sake of getting in is a terrible decision. That's absolutely the worst one. What are some other mistakes? I mean, I think relying just on off-market properties. I think that's a mistake. I know personally from experience from both sides, if I'm listing a property and if I'm trying to sell it off market, I usually have problems I'm going to have to overcome on that property. So I'm trying to sell it first before I take it to market. So there's usually a problem, or you're getting it 2 days before it's going to market anyway, and that's not going to make a big difference. So I do find that most off-market properties have bigger problems. Otherwise, they're really just pre-market. They're coming to market anyway. There's nothing wrong with those properties. But if it's absolutely off-market, there's usually something that I know as an agent I've got to overcome, and it's easier to do so without the masses when someone thinks they're going to get it for a bargain up front first.
What is your high-level process for how you become that area expert to spot the opportunities that are out there in the market?
First of all, we look at like what area is probably going to take off next? Like, what sort of government projects have been approved? Like, it's the same thing that the buyers agents do, and everyone else. Like, everyone does the same process, I think. So we look at like what developments approved, what spending is in play, what is the vacancy rate currently, and the history of it as well. I mean, we want to make sure that we don't have this like repeat vacancy rate all the time where it fluctuates. We want to know that this is unusual. We look at those things, then we drill down on like what area makes sense to purchase in.
Yeah, because I'm interested in the boots, like the
regions.
boots on the ground stuff, like the more like
Yep.
practical
Correct.
stuff. So you've already, let's just, because if we talk about data and research, we're going to be spending the next hour talking about supply and demand and infrastructure spending and all that good stuff. So let's say you've identified your area. You've got your Townsville, you've got your Mackay, you've got your Gladstone, Rockhampton. I'm talking all these kind of northern Queensland regions. What happens next? How do you then kind of
next? Yes, so we go out to the location. So we fly in. We meet with the agencies. So first of all, in my business, we pick a partner agency. So we interview and we pick the people that have their values aligned with ours. That's the first thing for us, and it should be the first thing that anyone that's looking to purchase in an area does. Like, pick someone whose values align with yours. It's not all about fee. So we pick them. We talk to these agencies and we find out what are the areas that they see the lower vacancy rates. Like, who's applying in each of the areas. They are the only people that know the type of tenancies that are successful in those areas and who's applying and who wants to live there. So if you get a whole bunch of tenancies applications in an area and none of them meet affordability because the government says there's like a cap, right? The neighborhood looks pretty bad. You generally know like that's an area that's not desirable. So unless you're like buying a property that's going to serve to house the low income earners and you're not going to shoot for the stars with rent, don't buy in that area because you've got a demographic that's like you're going to have to target. So we look at like for purchase price, what makes sense tenancy wise, who's going to apply for the property, what price are they maxed out at on the applications, what's the typical affordability of a tenant and where does the rent max out where most of the market drops off. Because like, you look in Mackay, for example, the rents are ridiculous in Mackay, like crazy, same as Brisbane pretty much. But wages are so much lower. So you look at some of the areas like Slade Point or something, for example, those properties rent for an enormous amount of money per week. But if you advertise it, you're going to get such a low amount of tenancy applications, or you're going to get applications you can't approve because the government will say you're putting them into hardship. And then again, all sorts of tenancy laws, they can break lease, no penalty, the rest of it. But so we look at all those things like, where's the rent cap out? Where is the most amount of interest from tenants? Where does it make sense that the rent caps out at a good yield? What is the demographic like? What are the schools like? What is the history of that neighborhood like? When you Google it, what appears? Like, is it going to turn off the people that you're trying to sell the property to or appeal to the tenant that's going to rent it? So we look at all of those things. We look at the crime rate. I mean, you can jump on Queensland Police and you can put in the address. You can see the type of crimes. In Townsville, if it says that a car was stolen, doesn't matter. They get stolen 50 a night. So just buy anywhere. That happens anyway. But if you see a lot of domestic violence, for example, in one area, then hey, that's a pretty rough area. And either I'm going to have a turnover of a tenant every year. So Heatley, for example, massive turnover of tenants every single year because people move there from out of town because the rents are cheaper or the prices were cheap to buy. And they discover that it's a really rough area. Lots of crime, especially domestic violence, things like that. And they move out. You're up for advertising, let fees, the rest of it, vacancy for a couple of weeks every single year in that location. So they're the sorts of things we look at so that we can tell like where it actually makes sense for someone to purchase, where they're not going to suffer all those problems.
I think for me, what this really pays to you have to make sure you've got a PM who's at the top of their game, because if you're getting somebody who's not quite on top of all these rules and regulations that are changing, you're going to put yourself in a situation where you may really be exposed. And I think it's
there's a lot of risk now. And the only
is.
person who's going to be able to mitigate it is your property manager. You're paying them for advice. If you're getting a young person with almost no experience and they can't tell what properties have been advertised under market value because of a lease break or because they came back to a market before 12 months is up, they're going to be advising you that that's market value to list your property for or do your lease renewal for. So in a state where we've lost almost all the experience out of property management since COVID, it's going to be really tough to find good property managers that can help with this going forward.
Very interesting. Yeah. So what are some of the questions? That's one of the things I wanted to cover off, is some of the questions to ask to find a good property manager. What are the things that we should be kind of going to dig out and find? Because most of the time it's like, who's the best property manager? Google, and then it'll start with Ray and end with White. Like, it's just, are they the best?
Look at Rate My Agent. That just tells you who leased the most properties. So that's a bit skewed because that's the biggest rent roll in town. The least amount of successful lease renewals because they had advertised the most amount of properties. So, Rate My Agent is, it's not, I don't use it. I don't even list on there anymore. I think it's skewed. I think all you're getting is like the big players that are like doing a less of a job. So questions to ask, absolutely ask, how many properties do you have under management and how many property managers do you have working on those properties? And I'm not talking like assistant property managers or leasing agents, like the actual person that does the day-to-day on that property. And then I'd be asking, are they pod based or portfolio? The difference is portfolio is one person that manages the entire process. They go to the property and do your routines. They negotiate your lease renewals. They bring the maintenance to you. If you've got a pod-based property manager, that means it's them and 2 or 3, sometimes 5 other people working under them. And they each do a different task. One goes and does all your routines. And then someone else brings you and says, hey, you should renew your lease, but they've never met your tenants. They don't know if they're reasonable with maintenance requests. They don't know how they're living. They're just looking at a report the same as you. So, a lot of this, I could go on for hours. There's so many questions to ask. And I love when people actually ask them because, ask like, what is your average days on market? What's the average weekly rent for your rent roll? All of those questions matter. How many years experience in your rent roll? Because we know that I think something like 88% of property managers have left the industry in Queensland since COVID.
Right. Wow. Yeah. Some other ones are like industry, area expertise as well.
Yes.
Like what do you? Because I mean, there's some like we're going to be talking about Townsville a little bit, Mackay a little bit, but there are some streets in Townsville that you just don't want to be buying, and you call someone, and you're like, hey, what do you think of this street? And they're like, yeah, it's a great street, cool, red flag straight away, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
definitely you want an area.
It's a great street.
Yeah. But also, there's nothing wrong with an agency that says, hey, we don't manage in that suburb, because at least they know their limits. Or they say, hey, I don't manage a property that the weekly rent's under $400 a week. We don't want the little 2-bed units that, are almost not really meeting minimum housing standards and can't be rented soon. Those agents actually know what their bread and butter is. Like, they know how to do a job in a specific location or with a specific type of property. If an agent says, no, we don't do rooming, or we don't do Airbnb short-term rentals. The agent that says no to some things are sometimes oftentimes better than the agents that say yes to every property that an investor calls them about.
Okay, main roads, right? Main roads. Don't buy them. So I don't buy on main roads. That's just one of my rules. What are your thoughts on main roads and some of these key detractors?
Personally, I have bought on main roads once or twice, but I've bought stranded property on main roads. I haven't bought houses. I don't like the idea of having to pull off my off the main road, open up my gate and get into my house. But into a unit complex doesn't really bother me. Tenants that are paying that sort of price don't care. I probably wouldn't buy a house on a main road unless it was the deal of the century.
Yeah, and that's ultimately what it comes down to with any property. If someone's like, "Hey Joe, you can have this unit for $5," yeah, I'm going to buy a unit. I'm going to buy a townhouse. I'm going to buy. Everything has a value, and I think everything. And this is, I guess, the hard part about property investing, right? It is, it's trying to optimize, try and work out exactly what the variables are and how they all affect and come into play.
And put a value on the detractor. Like, what is the value of being on a main road? For me, maybe that's $20,000. So I want it $20,000 under market value for the one behind it. Put a value on it, and then if it makes sense, then what's wrong with the property? Nothing.
Yeah, easy to buy, hard to sell. I mean, that's my thing with it. Is absolutely right now everything's going gangbusters. It's very easy to get a property rented. It's very hard to buy a property. The market's booming. But fast forward 5 years, what's going to happen? It's going to be there's a big pool of properties to rent. Yeah, well, I'm not going to choose the one on the main road. I don't want to hear the road noise. But then how does that kind of go as well? Like, how do you think about it? Like, is it one street across? Like, is it just exclude all the main road, or is it case by case? How do you think about that?
I don't know. I think it's case by case. And honestly, sometimes tenants like the main road because it's next to the bus stop or it's next to the train station. So there's definite factors that then it becomes like a value add for the tenant. It may not be for you buying the property or selling the property, but it becomes a value add for the tenant. So if you can get it for the right price, you might have a better yield. So depending on what your like strategy is with the property, maybe it is the right one.
Yeah. Okay. What else is there? There is age. So there are properties, in Queensland that are like, 1945, 1920s, 1930s, 1950s, 1960s. Have you got like how do you think about the age?
I bought a property that was hitting 100 years old in Townsville, and I had no idea that Townsville Council adds them to the Heritage Register at 100 years without telling you.
Oh,
So
wow.
that was a fun one for me. The renovation was absolutely the biggest nightmare of my life. It took forever. I would have definitely come out losing a lot of money had COVID not happened and an American got stuck and paid more for the property than I would have ever paid. But yeah, I mean, the age of the property does matter because every council has different rules. Like Townsville, for example, like if you're going to buy in like Pimlico or Mundingborough, almost everything is coming up for 100 years. That is going on the historical register. You are not even going to know.
No development.
And then you can't do anything to the property. So everything, like we had to have the council out. They documented everything with an iPad, and everything that was of historical value had to be put back in the property after the reno. It was an absolute nightmare. Couldn't have garage, could have a pool, but it had to be in the backyard and behind the house. Couldn't have a front fence, couldn't cut down the tree in the front yard. It was protected. So older homes definitely have a lot of extra rules. I'd say older homes are great if you're going to make it your home to live in.
Right.
As an investment, not so great.
Right. Okay. So if it's like 60 years old, 50, 40, 30, is there genres of what's that?
I mean, like you've got the age of the homes where you've got asbestos in them. That's not always great. I have clients all the time send me a link to a property. You can do a rental appraisal, tell me anything about the property I might need to know. And I'm like, you have asbestos tiles in your kitchen. If you buy this, the first thing you should do is lay a vinyl plank over the top of them, encase them forever so they don't get broken up, and you'll never have a problem. Like asbestos doesn't mean run for the hills either. For me, sometimes it means I'm going to be able to negotiate down this property, and I'm going to cover the thing up, and I'm never going to look at it again. So I truly believe that some things that are like detractors for other people are not so much for me. I know the property well enough. I've done enough renovations that I know, hey, I can make that problem go away really quick.
Yeah.
Well, you love a good reno, and you love, I'm sure you probably project manage one or two. What are some of the really sort of quick wins that people should be thinking about when doing a value add?
Yeah. I mean, it depends where you buy because the rules are different everywhere, right? So like in Brisbane, for example, you can't convert a garage into a bedroom without getting it approved. Otherwise, it's still not really a bedroom. Townsville, you can do it. So as long as it's under roof, do whatever you want with the inside. So add a bedroom here and there. So if you've got an older home with a single garage, no one likes a single garage. They're tight. They're not really great. Close the single garage in. It's usually got the laundry at the back, ensuite, main bedroom. That's a pretty easy add. Put up a double carport in the front of the house. So long as you've got like the 1.5 meter setback from the fence, you don't even need like approvals. So in Townsville, it's really, really easy to add value. And especially, I see a lot of homes where bedrooms to living areas don't make sense. Like you've got 3 bedrooms and you've got 3 living areas. As a rental, that makes 0 sense at all. So close the formal dining room or the media room in. Like the quickest value add, honestly, is putting a door in the media room and being able to call it a bedroom. It doesn't have to have a closet or anything. It just has to have a door. So if you've got a media room, put a door on it. Then we don't have to advertise it as maybe a 3-bed with a media room. We're calling it a 4-bed. Once you're a 4-bed, you can raise the rent because people on realestate.com will see the property as a 4-bed and say, yeah, that rent makes sense. Otherwise, they're looking at a 3-bed going, oh, that's really high. They're not looking into the floor plan to see if it has extra rooms.
So this is, you have to update it on RP data. So it's very easy to do on RP data, but you just have to ask your property manager, hey, we're putting this wall up. Can you just please update it on RP data? And they'll be like, yeah.
It's the easiest job. And honestly, it updates automatically when you list the property. So we don't even have to do anything. But yeah, do that. Like close in, if you've got a dining room, you've only got to put one wall across a door, maybe an aircon in there, and change the switch with an electrician to be inside the room. You're looking at like $3,500 to do that for one wall, and you're going to add a huge amount of not just value for rent but equity. And then you can take it out and buy another property. And a really good property manager is going to identify it and go through their portfolio and not just say, hey, you've got a lease renewal coming up, let's work on that. Hey, you've got a lease renewal coming up. Where could we add value to your home with a quick reno or a quick value add to increase it even further so that you can buy again? Like, can we help you buy another property? That's the quickest way for people in my position to grow their business. Grow your business from your existing clientele, you know what I mean? And in the process of doing that, you're helping the people on your rent roll grow their portfolio. And for me, that's why I do it. I want everyone to be in the same comfortable position that I am. But I love the value adds. Like people say, do a bathroom or do a kitchen. No, absolutely not. As long as they're in decent condition, just replace the vanity. Tenants only care about the things that affect their belongings. New carpet, new window coverings, put a new bench top on the kitchen just to refresh it and some new handles. Don't do the whole kitchen unless it is absolutely falling apart. A new lick of paint like every 5 or 6 years. Do not overspend on a rental property. I just don't see the point of doing full-on renovations unless you've bought something knowing that's what I'm going to have to do before I put tenant in.
Yeah. And